Hey y'all. Okay, I'm really excited. We're almost there for our beta launch of the new navigation. Oh my goodness. We've had a ton of internal usage, which has been really helpful. One of the things I think we realized is that we haven't communicated much about how we got to where we did with the information architecture of the new navigation. So I wanted to chat about that briefly. So I want to start with, I believe this is all rooted in user research. So I'm going to start with Adam and Ashley. Can y'all kind of help us understand what sort of user input we took in to determine the appropriate information architecture?
Yeah, a lot. So I'll first say that working around the topic of navigation is hard from a research perspective and from a design perspective too. It is incredibly hard. There's lots of strong opinions out there internally, externally too. There's lots of personas. So many different types of people use our product, only certain areas of it too. So there's a tremendous amount of information that researchers need to really look at. And we have Ashley here who conducted a lot of that research. And we went as far back, I think, started this effort a year plus ago. Lots of different studies. So Ashley, since you're here, I'd like to hand it over to you to just talk us through what research was done with navigation, what we learned, and yeah, take it away, please.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, thanks for having me to kind of go through this. But yeah, just like to start from kind of the beginning when I onboarded early last year and everything that's been done up to this point, just to give a little background. So over time, even before I joined, we had learned from various sources like SUS that current navigation was confusing and overwhelming for users. And looking at previous research that had been conducted, a lot of it was more tactical in nature and really focused on what was happening with less focus on why. So for example, rearranging left sidebar items and seeing how it performed. So we learned what happened, but didn't have as much understanding as to why it was happening. So to fill this knowledge gap, we developed a research program to better understand our users more deeply and their mental models for navigating in GitLab. And since, like Adam had mentioned, navigation affects all GitLab users, but we can't necessarily study all personas at once. Our team decided to focus on 4 key personas for these research efforts and hopes to gain a holistic point of view from different kinds of users. So the 4 we focused on were software engineers, product managers, security professionals, and operations professionals. So in the spring of last year, we started off with diary studies to really understand the primary tasks that different personas were doing, how they were doing it, how they navigated to complete those tasks, what was working well, what wasn't working well. And at a very, very high level, we learned that different personas used very specific items and areas within GitLab, and the scope of what they use and how they navigate is often pretty small. We learned that oftentimes they don't need to navigate much for primary tasks because they're able to do things within one page, and they're able to link in through different things like bookmarks, external links, Slack messages, and things like that. And that's also perceived to be a really positive thing. And if they do need to navigate, oftentimes they just need to get to a project that's important to them and then go from there. So the study revealed that enabling some sort of customization to the left sidebar would be beneficial to make things that are important to them more easily accessible and also reduce the amount of items in the left sidebar that they kind of have to sift through, which is overwhelming. Other things that would have been helpful from their perspective is easier access to relevant projects that don't rely on time, because time can go away if they go on vacation or something like that. So these insights, along with other data sources like SUS, helped inform our navigation themes that influenced our North Star work. So one of those themes was minimize feeling overwhelmed. So based on this, concepts were developed and assessed to see whether or not they were going to address those navigation challenges. So a lot of concept testing was done in the fall of last year, and we started with 6 concepts. 2 of those 6 felt easier to use and were more familiar, required less relearning. So the team did a second round of testing to focus on those, to validate them further and increase confidence in design directions. The current design ultimately was preferred because it helped users navigate between projects without losing context. and it supported both mature and new users with their more common workflows. So those were collecting feedbacks on those concepts and also assessing key tasks for those different personas. And we learned that, And then earlier this year, moving forward, we focused on the left sidebar items. And so we conducted a facilitated card sort to understand how users were going to group those items and why. So we looked at those 4 key personas, and the goal of this research was to see how we could reorganize those things to more closely align with user expectations. And so from that, we learned that generally group names made sense, the ones that we were providing, with the exception of monitor and operations. Those felt a little more nebulous in certain cases. They seemed to overlap, and so there wasn't a lot of clarity of how those would differ. We also saw trends of users creating new groups for items that they didn't feel like fit into categories that we had proposed. Things like wiki and members and things like that. Those were oftentimes categories that they created that they thought were more of like knowledge sharing or relevant to the entire team. So that was really interesting to learn. We also learned that some things did align with user expectations, things like product management related items, security related items, as opposed to like the operations items that was less clear. We also learned that users wanted quick access to things that were relevant more specifically to their role, like ops professionals wanted more easy access to pipelines, for example. These findings also provided confidence to things that we were already working on. So things like pinned items that enables customization to the left sidebar. And for this whole reclassification effort, the team did consider all of this research and this card sort as one data point. We also looked at other proposals and analytics data to see ultimately where things should go. So a couple examples are from the card sort. A new collection was added for more generic type items, and that was called manage. Some items that were thought to overlap between CI/CD and operations have been moved under CI/CD in the current proposal, which is build. And also it reinforced other decisions like keeping analytics items together, which the research showed. So that's a lot, but that's like a very high level of everything that happened. And then right now we are dog fooding the reclassification, collecting feedback on it. We're also conducting soon, any day now, kicking off the longitudinal study that is going to follow users experiencing the new nav over a month. And we're going to be checking in with them over the course of the month. And we really just want to learn how it's working for them, how they feel about it over time, and to learn a lot really in that period of time. And then for long-term monitoring, we just launched a quarterly navigation survey to baseline the current experience, and then we will be tracking that on a quarterly basis. So we have a lot of feedback sources coming in to learn and kind of monitor over time.
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, that is a tremendous amount of research, and I think it's definitely well justified. There was one thing I wanted to call out that you mentioned, how this new nav supports both mature and new users. I think that is incredibly important to call out, because we see through our other data sources like SUS, how new users and learnability, that it's hard to learn GitLab and that navigation. Anything we can do there to help is going to be great. So great work, everybody. David, I think you probably wanted to talk a little bit about some other data sources that were considered too.
Yeah, so I do want to maybe say one or two things. First, one, navigation is hard. Everyone has an opinion. That includes myself, the product leadership team, members of UX, members of R&D, all the way across the company. I would say that I feel like we're hitting the right spots because we're getting frustration points from people, which means we are touching on areas that need to be focused on, but also we also need to figure out how we address in a way that, as Adam said, and actually like support new and experienced users. And so the couple of things I want to touch on that we did see as gaps that led to some changes in the proposal. The first was, as Ashley said, there was some conflicting data across the personas. And so what we ended up doing was taking customer interviews, a lot of them coming from me, where I was showing screenshots of this starting last year, to start getting feedback as to like what makes sense to that user. And what was really great about that is we learned that verbs are a great way to explain what you're doing in the UI. And so we went from calling things security and compliance to just secure, or some of the things around operations, as Ashley touched on, to put them in a way that is better understandable for the users. The other thing that we got a really strong response on is the journey you can take through the navigation. And so I'm just going to quickly share. And you can see here, I'm in the GitLab project, but I start at the top of the UI and I work my way down as I build the application and deploy it. And for users, that takes away that guesswork of like, where do I go to do the next thing? And so you're starting, with doing planning. You're going to code, you're going to build the application, you're going to secure it, you're going to deploy it and operate it. You want to monitor in production. All those things help users understand how I get through my journey in GitLab. And I'll tell you, if you want to get any sense as to whether or not we're touching on the right things, people are copying us already and we're only still in our beta. So we're hitting on things that are helping others see that they also have navigation problems. I'll end with this comment. I know change is hard. I'm also someone who sometimes struggles with change. I will say what we're really seeing is the ability to meet our users where they are, whether they're experts or whether they're new to GitLab. And I myself, I've been here 3.5 years. Before that, I've used GitLab for several years. I still would occasionally not be able to find something. And in the time that I've just been playing with the alpha and the beta navigation, I've been able to find things a lot faster, both in my customer demos and just my day-to-day usage of our product. So a big shout out to the Foundations team, the UX research team, everyone across the company who's contributed both code and comments. And I'll say, give the team grace. If you hate something, it's okay to hate it. Just provide constructive feedback so we can try to address that. And I will state that sometimes, and I don't remember which celebrity said this or person said it, but it's like sometimes compromise means everyone loses. I kind of look at it as compromise means that everyone's going to win. And so please have that insight as you talk with the team about it and kind of talk about like what's next and what we're going to be doing. I want to hand over to Kristen and Tori to talk a little bit about today and beyond. So Kristen, you want to take that away?
Yeah, and so everyone on the call so far has illustrated how amazing, the amazing amount of work that's gone into discovering this. And then at the final hours, kind of aligning David and with some of our branding initiatives on how we want to use verbs. And it just has all come together beautifully. It has been incredible to kind of watch it go over the last 9 to 10 months of all of this work to get to the point where now we have something that we're really proud of and it feels good. That said, I wanted to also just touch on like, as we move into the generally available for all of our customers, we do still want your feedback. We're going to be putting up some blogs that also encourage the feedback and talk about a lot of the vision here and how we got to this. But we do know that everyone does still hate a navigation update no matter what, and it's hard to change your patterns. So we have a lot of empathy for that. And that said, we do want to get your feedback as well. I don't know, Tori, if you wanted to add anything on the end of that.
Yeah, I'll just say we do have a number of issues that we're working through for general availability, a number of additional issues for when we just turn on the navigation for everyone and don't look back. So we are keeping in mind all of the feedback, making sure we incorporate it. And then as Ashley mentioned, we have the longitudinal study as well as additional touch points throughout time so that we can continue to iterate, as we always do at GitLab.
This is really helpful, even though I've been a part of this initiative from before the beginning. It was nice to hear all of this in one place. So thanks, everybody.